Chapter 3. A Parent's Touch. Attachment parenting has been around as long as there have been mothers and babies. It is, in fact, only recently that this style of parenting has needed a name at all. For it is basically the common sense parenting we all would do if left to our own healthy resources. Bill and Martha Sears. Human beings are born quite helpless. They require the presence and care of their parents for a long time before they can be independent. A child's early years are very important for its development. It needs to grow in a warm and compassionate environment if it is to turn into a well-functioning and well-balanced adult. A healthy bond of attachment with a parent is quintessential. For this, we need to give a lot of close physical presence to young children. Our child-rearing practices today are too isolatory. We are taking babies and young children away from their parents at the time they need them the most. We are ignoring their genetic expectations, and in doing so, condemning them to a lifelong feeling of scarcity. Before we look at different practices that can create a more intimate bond between infants and their caretakers, we will have a look at what is probably the major theoretical framework underpinning the infant-parent bond, John Bowlby's attachment theory. The science of attachment. The psychologist who has done the most formative research with regard to parent-infant bonding is probably John Bowlby. He was a big advocate for a close relationship between parents and children. The Englishman developed his attachment theory in the second half of the 20th century. He had been sent to boarding school as a young child. Later on, he worked with delinquent children and children that got separated from their parents during World War II. This led to him to believe that the infant and the young child should experience a warm, intimate, and continuous relationship with his mother or permanent mother substitute in which both find satisfaction and enjoyment. This might sound like common sense for many people today, but in the 50s, it was wildly controversial. The Industrial Revolution in the late 18th century had started shaking up traditional family patterns, separating children more and more from their parents. In the first half of the 19th century, ideas of behaviorist psychologists such as John B. Watson were fashionable in the West. They believed we should not give our babies much care and affection. This might spoil them and make them dictate our lives. Instead, they should learn to be independent. Moreover, hospitals and nurseries were obsessed with hygiene. Children were rarely touched or allowed visitors. L. E. Hall, one of the leading pediatricians of the time, believed, for instance, it was better not to kiss kids. There are many serious objections to kissing infants. Many grave diseases may be communicated in this way. The kissing of infants upon the mouth should under no circumstances be permitted. Infants should be kissed, if at all, upon the cheek or forehead, but the less even of this, the better. Many of the children raised in these settings grew up socially and intellectually disturbed, and interestingly, were also more prone to disease. Attachment theory posits that the young child needs its parent or primary caregiver as a safe base from where it can explore the world and can return to in case of emergency. It emphasizes that if anything goes wrong in the development of secure attachment early on in life, for instance, if the caregiver is not present when needed, or if the caregiver is overprotective, this will have the severe consequences for the child's development. Bowlby's ideas, though controversial, were highly influential in the child care institutions of the day. There was a move towards caring for infants and children in smaller groups. Foster care and hospital visiting hours for children were increased. Many of these practices have become the norm today. Bowlby saw attachment as an evolutionary strategy that evolved to ensure the survival of helpless human babies. Compared to other animal species, human beings are born quite underdeveloped. A newborn calf can stand on its legs and walk almost straight after birth. Little Homo sapiens, on the other hand, need many years before they can take care of themselves. This is believed to be because of our evolutionary history. We evolved to walk on two legs, which made our hips and women's birth canal smaller. On the other hand, our brains evolved to be bigger and bigger. In order for increasingly bigger heads to pass through increasingly smaller birth canals, humans needed to be born earlier, when their brains were less developed and smaller. Bowlby's ideas were tried and tested in a series of well-known experiments by Harry Harlow. He took infant monkeys and put them together in a cage with surrogate mothers made of cloth and wire. Invariably, the monkeys formed a bond of attachment with their surrogate mother, repeatedly clinging to it and retreating to it when afraid. He then let monkeys choose between two mothers, one metal wire one that provided food, and one cloth padded one that did not give any food. The infant monkeys always preferred clinging to the wire mother. Harlow's experiment gave an experimental foundation to Bowlby's theory of attachment. The behaviorist had thought that children bonded mostly with their mothers because they provided food. Harlow clearly showed that attachment patterns are inborn. They're not about food, but rather about providing a feeling of safety and what Harlow called contact comfort. His experiments clearly illustrated the importance of the presence and comforting touch of the caregiver. More sinister support for Bowlby's assumptions came late in the 80s. In 1989, the regime of Romanian dictator Nicolae Ceausescu was overthrown. This exposed the world to the abysmal conditions of tens of thousands of children in Romanian orphanages. Many of them had been severely neglected and showed a major developmental problems, often persisting on to a much later age. The main cause of this was not physical abuse, but rather complete emotional and social neglect. In a less extreme context, the past decades have seen plenty of research confirming that children need care and independence. Parents who are not supportive or overly controlling will raise children who are less healthy and less kind and will have more psychological problems. Attachment parenting. We have come a long way since the time of John Bowlby. Many of the practices that were common practice of a century ago would now be frowned upon in most places. Since the second half of the last century, some have called to move away from the sterile and unemotional behaviorist treatment of infants and toddlers. Just as with birth, there are people advocating to follow our instincts. Yet we still have a long way to go if we want to create secure attachment and give infants the care they dearly need. Our child-rearing practices are still very isolatory. We tend to separate young children from their parents, only holding them occasionally, often denying them breastfeeding, ignoring their crying, and letting them sleep alone. When they get a little bit older, we leave them with nannies, send them away to nurseries, kindergartens, and then schools. In this way, we disturb bonding mechanisms that have been carefully crafted by millions of years of evolution. We will have a look at schooling in the next chapter. So how can we put this into practice and create secure attachment? How to take care of infants and young children in a way that their needs are being met? How do we fulfill the infant's genetic expectations for its comfort, security, and its parents' presence? We need a parenting style that fulfills the infant's need for attachment, follows our natural instincts, and give infants a lot of close physical contact. This has been called attachment parenting by pediatrician William Sears and his wife Martha. Research has shown that this parenting style reduces stress for the child and has both physical and psychological benefits. Attachment parenting entails being highly responsive to the child, which especially includes behaviors that help children better regulate emotional states such as distress, fear, and anger. In this chapter, we will discuss 4 practices: baby wearing, breastfeeding, responding to the baby's crying, and co-sleeping. There are many other topics that could be considered, but they fall beyond the scope of this book. Baby wearing and kangaroo care. Babies need to be close to their mother. The World Health Organization recommends in its postnatal care guidelines to not separate newborns from their mothers. Babies come into this world helpless and need her reassuring presence, her taste, her touch, her smell, her warmth, even her heartbeat. Therefore, it is natural for human babies to be in continuous close physical contact with their caregivers. Hunter-gatherer tribes are known to nearly constantly carry their babies on them. Other primates' babies constantly cling to the mother's body's hair. Humans have lost most of their body hair throughout their evolution, and so the parents need to hold them. In fact, human babies still show instinctive grasping reflexes, which is speculated to be an evolutionary relic of our hairier past. In mammals, in general, there seem to be 2 parenting styles. There are species that carry their young around and species that leave their young in the nest while they venture out looking for food. Humans show characteristics of the former group. In modern westernized societies, infants experience relatively little physical contact with their parents. This goes against our nature. It results in increased crying and even colic excessive crying without apparent reason, which is unique to humans. We start to take babies away from their mothers soon after their birth. This became the norm with the medicalization of birth in the past century. The separation continues after they leave the hospital. We put them in separate beds, in separate rooms, in separate institutions, nurseries, and push them around in strollers, all of which minimize contact. Instead of keeping them near us, we use baby monitors to know how they are doing, and instead of stimulating them through direct contact, we use colorful sensory toys to keep them entertained. There is little scientific research on the benefits of baby wearing as such. However, there is a vast body of research on skin-to-skin contact between mothers and babies, the benefits of which might well apply to baby wearing. This research was inspired by the Kangaroo Mother Care (KMC) program, which started in the late 1970s with Colombian doctors Dr. Edgar Ray Sanabria and Dr. Hector Martinez. They were facing a scarcity of incubators to treat preterm infants and often had to host 2 infants in the same incubator. While treating these infants, they observed the ability of mothers to provide for the diverse needs of infants through skin-to-skin contact. This inspired them to try an alternative to incubators and have the mothers carry their babies with constant skin-to-skin contact. Their method proved to be a huge success. Today, kangaroo care is recommended by the World Health Organization as an equal alternative to incubators to treat premature and low birth weight babies that are stable and do not have immediate health problems. Skin-to-skin contact has many benefits. It prevents hypothermia, makes babies less susceptible to infections, and makes them gain weight faster. Mothers are generally more satisfied with this way of taking care of their premature and underweight babies. These benefits extend to full-term and normal birth weight babies. Scientific research shows that skin-to-skin contact, especially right after birth, helps stabilize the baby's body temperature, breathing, and heartbeat. It is calming for both mother and child and improves their bonding. It speeds up the expulsion of the placenta. Moreover, it facilitates breastfeeding. Right after birth, the baby will instinctively look for the mother's breast, and if left uninterrupted will attach to it and continue to nurse more effectively. KMC may even improve cognitive development of the newborn. Similar benefits seem to apply for father skin-to-skin contact. The WHO therefore recommends placing babies in skin-to-skin contact with their mothers during the first hour after birth. Failure to do so will increase the risk of the baby dying by 33% to 50%. Breastfeeding. Mother's milk is the most natural and nutritious food for a baby. Through millions of years of evolution, it has been perfectly adapted to the developmental and digestive needs of the newborn. Its composition changes over time, attuning to the changing needs of the growing infant. It is therefore far superior to formula. The World Health Organization recommends nursing to be initiated within 1 hour after birth. Babies should be breastfed on demand, as often as they want, day and night. Babies should be exclusively breastfed for the first 6 months of their lives and partially breastfed up until at least 2 years of age. There is no maximum age for breastfeeding. The young child will naturally stop drinking mother's milk. In hunter-gatherer societies, weaning happens at around 3 years of age and is often gradual and child-led. My eldest daughter breastfed until the age of 4, and then made it clear she did not want to anymore. And so breastfeeding has many benefits. It protects against malnutrition, intestinal infections, and diarrhea. It is notably cheaper than formula or other options. And also the environmental impact is much lower, as mother's milk is 100% natural and self-produced. On the long term, it helps prevent obesity and diabetes and even benefits cognitive, social, and emotional development. For mothers, it reduces the risk of ovarian and breast cancer. It can even prevent menstruation from happening, naturally helping to space pregnancies. One researcher concludes, an infant suckling at his or her mother's breast is not simply receiving a meal, but is intensely engaged in a dynamic, bidirectional biological dialogue. It is a process in which physical, biochemical, hormonal, psychosocial exchange take place, designed for the transfer of much-needed nutrients as well as for building a lasting psychosocial bond between the mother and her infant. Among mammals, breastfeeding has evolved over millions of years as a multi-tiered interaction to meet the biological and psychosocial needs of the progeny, enhancing its well-being and survival chances, as well as complementing the nurturing role of the mother. Thus, this unique dynamic process benefits both the mother and her infant. Breastfeeding needs to be considered quintessentially as a continuation of the more intense intrauterine dialogue mediated through the placenta and the umbilical cord between the mother and her fetus. However, many do not hold breastfeeding in such high esteem. When people on the street saw my wife breastfeeding my daughter at the age of 1, they would stop in shock and ask us until when we intended to breastfeed her. I became so tired of these discussions, I ended up answering them we would breastfeed her until 18. After that, people would leave us alone, thinking we were crazy. This shows how far removed we are from our natural expectations. People fear that if they will have nature have its way, people will still breastfeed when they are adults. Despite its obvious advantages, only 40% of children worldwide are exclusively breastfed for the first 6 months, and at 2 years of age, only 45% receive mother's milk. Adequate breastfeeding could save over 800,000 children's lives every year. The decrease in intelligence alone causes an estimated yearly loss of $300 billion worldwide. 0.5% of the world's total gross national income. Over the course of the 20th century, breastfeeding rates went down in high-income countries and in the upper classes of lower-income countries. Breast milk substitutes were perceived as modern and prestigious, and breastfeeding was associated with being poor and unsophisticated. I was born in 1965. When my mom tried breastfeeding me, the pediatrician told her breastfeeding was for primitive people. The past decades, after scientific studies showed the advantages of breastfeeding, governments and NGOs such as La Leash League and the World Alliance for Breastfeeding Action started promoting breastfeeding. Interest grew in a more natural way of nursing. Today, breastfeeding rates seem to be rising, but progress is slow, and the world is still not a supportive and enabling environment for most women who want to breastfeed. As one recent study puts it, there are several factors that are holding back people from breastfeeding. One is the sales and marketing of the breast milk substitutes. Even though in the early 1980s, the World Health Organization already adopted a resolution to curb the marketing, implementation is lacking, and sales are still going up. The entire market was estimated to be worth over $70 billion in 2019. Another major contributing factor are working environments. Many workplaces are not particularly welcoming for breastfeeding mothers, and only half the countries in the world allow the minimum of 14 weeks of maternity leave commanded by the International Labour Organization, which is still only half of the 6 months that the mother is supposed to give exclusive breastfeeding. Let me end this paragraph with another personal experience that clearly demonstrates how disconnected we are from our genetic expectation. When our first daughter was 9 months old, we went to a clinic to get her weighed. The nurse asked us how she was sleeping. We told her she was sleeping fine, only waking up a few times to nurse and then falling asleep again. The nurse was astonished and asked, "So she's using the breast as a substitute for the pacifier?" I answered her, "I think the pacifier is a substitute for the breast, not the other way around. Women are born with breasts for a reason. Babies have an innate drive to suckle on them. This just goes to show we still have a long way ahead before all our genetic needs can be met." A baby's cry. Our babies cry a lot. In modern westernized cultures, it is normal for an infant to cry up to almost 3 hours a day. This causes a lot of distress to parents and many sleepless hours. Many think there is just no way around this, and they stop responding to the baby's crying. Or even worse, they purposely start ignoring it in order to reduce the crying. This was the course of action advocated by the behaviorist educators and followed by many a parent up until today. The behaviorists considered crying to be a random behavior that did not convey any meaning. They believed comforting babies when they were crying was a way of rewarding them for doing so. It would reinforce the crying behavior, eventually creating spoiled children. As one child-rearing pamphlet from the 1920s writes, "Crying will get him what he wants, sufficient to make a spoiled, fussy baby, and a household tyrant whose continual demands make a slave of the mother. Therefore, one should just let babies cry it out, no matter how long that would take." A baby's crying, however, is not random, nor is it unavoidable. If you keep your baby close and give it the right care, it will hardly cry. We need to properly understand crying. Crying takes a lot of energy from the baby. It would be wasteful to do so for no reason. Rather, it is one of the most important ways for newborns to communicate their needs. According to Bowlby's attachment theory, it is meant to attract the attention of the caregiver. The baby cries because it is hungry, in pain, or lonely. It is unpleasant for us to hear a baby cry, and so we naturally respond to it. In this way, secure attachment can be formed. From this perspective, a baby should never be left to cry it out. It will disturb the attachment process and will leave the baby feeling lost and insecure. Research shows that holding crying babies reduces their crying instead of increasing it. As mentioned in the paragraph on baby wearing, human infants are meant to be in close contact with their caregiver. Traditional hunter-gatherer tribes carry their infants most of the time, allowing them to nurse whenever they want. Their young hardly cry, and if they cry, it is mostly because they are separated from their parents. The same goes for primates. In prehistoric times, crying would have exposed us to predators. It would not make any sense to leave a baby to cry alone. Rather, crying was meant to urgently reunite us with our caregivers. Why do our babies cry so much then? As mentioned before, this is because we ignore their need for close physical contact. Most of the time, babies are separated from their parents, and their crying is not immediately attended to. Because they are separated, they are fed less frequently, which also leads to more crying. Moreover, it does not allow parents to pick up earlier clues of the baby's distress, like fussing and whimpering. This leads the baby to start crying as its last resort. It would not start crying if it had other options, because crying is, as mentioned before, an energy-intensive and in a hunter-gatherer setting, dangerous behavior. We have to note that babies who are routinely ignored indeed cry less. However, research shows they are still equally anxious. Their distress has not disappeared. They just grow accustomed to being ignored and give up asking for help. This is a form of learned helplessness. If someone is in a painful situation repeatedly and cannot find a way out, they will start to believe they have no power to help themselves and will stop trying to get out of painful situations altogether. They learn to be helpless. This state of learned helplessness has been associated with depression. So the behaviorist's belief that crying babies should be ignored is clearly not supported by scientific research, nor by looking at tribal societies and related species. Our instincts clearly tell us to give all the care we can to a helpless crying infant. If we fail to do so, this can lead to lasting trauma and a deep feeling of scarcity. Bed sharing. Infants and children have been sleeping together with their parents since time immemorial. Primates, our evolutionary siblings and cousins, also sleep together with their offspring. The Industrial Revolution in the 19th century drastically changed sleeping patterns and started to require children to sleep separate, usually much to their dislike. One historian notes, "All available historical and cross-cultural evidence suggests that solitary sleeping for children is an anomaly of the modern industrialized West." As mentioned earlier, babies are quite helpless creatures. They do not enjoy being left alone, so it is natural for them to sleep with their parents and enjoy their comforting presence. If a few basic safety measures are attended to, like not sleeping in modern bedding that is too soft, there can be no harm in this. Babies wake up regularly at night to nurse. Sleeping together gives them easy access to the breast. The baby can nurse when it needs to, and the mother does not even need to fully wake up. Bed sharing, therefore, encourages breastfeeding. If the child does not sleep together with the mom but is hungry, it will have to resort to crying in order to attract her attention and be fed. This disrupts everyone's sleep. As a solution, some will use a baby monitor to make sure their baby is doing well, while the natural way is just to have the baby in bed with the mother. Many Western families will even regularly ignore a baby's night crying, as mentioned in the previous paragraph. Parents hope the baby will learn to sleep through the night, or may even actively try and train it to do so. As discussed earlier, ignoring the baby does not have the intended consequences. It is natural for babies to wake up at night, and they can and should not be taught to do otherwise. Wanting your baby to sleep through the night is not based on the baby's physical and emotional needs, but more on the parent's own wish for uninterrupted sleep. Many parents are unsure until what age they should let their children sleep with them. If they keep sleeping together, they are afraid their children might fail to become independent. However, the child will naturally feel when they are ready to sleep alone and want more independence. Going against the child's instincts will create a feeling of scarcity. It may well cause the very problem of insecurity and emotional dependence parents so want to avoid. Letting a child sleep with his parents promotes rather than obstructs independence and self-confidence. Parents also may feel their privacy is jeopardized and fear that their child may be harmed if they are exposed to their sexual activity. Judging from the number of children that are born in co-sleeping cultures, it seems that parents have found ways to overcome this challenge by finding another space or discreetly having sex while their children are fast asleep. So, to conclude, co-sleeping with your child is more emotionally healthy for them. This is also what scientific research is starting to show. Putting your infant in a separate bed or room goes against its genetic expectations and can be traumatizing. Of course, this is but a general recommendation and might not work for your personal situation. Every adult is different and every child is different. Suppose you have a very stressful job and you are restless at night. In that case, you should disturb your child's sleep, and it will be better for them to sleep separately. As I said before, it is good to make your own informed decision.
This is Orville Radio, Voices from the City of Dawn.